And for me, the simple question is, how is this trade war, how are these tariffs going to help the American people? And when I say the American people, I mean the working class American people.
In this clip from Piers Morgan Uncensored, Piers Morgan has guests Chuck Todd and Jamaal Bowman on to talk about tariffs. And Chuck Todd, I think, plays it relatively safe. Jamaal Bowman makes some very salient points. There's not a lot of overshouting, as is usually the case on Piers Morgan's program. But I think pay particular attention in this clip to what Chuck Todd and Jamaal Bowman are saying. And then I will have my opinions, and I want to know what you think in the comments. But let's check it out together.
I'm joined by Chuck Todd, host of the Chuck ToddCast, Jamaal Bowman, the former Democratic Congressman for New York, Matt Schlapp, the chairman of CPAC, and Lindy Li, the former fundraiser for the Democratic National Committee. Well, welcome to all of you. Chuck Todd, welcome to Uncensored, making your debut. And congratulations on breaking out into this brave new world, which I think you'll find very exciting.
Thank you, and be gentle.
Yeah. Of course. It's great to see you, Chuck. Look, you've been in Washington a long time. You've seen it all before. Mm-hmm. I don't think any of us have ever seen anything quite like what is happening here. I've got to be honest, I just don't know if it could work. I mean, I'm keeping an open mind, as I do with all things Trump, that if you get away from the often incendiary rhetoric and the kind of brutal methodology, is there a method to the madness? I'm looking at the markets this morning. You've got a full-blown trade war now between the United States and China, but the market's gone up on this news, which suggests to me that maybe, even on Wall Street, they're thinking, well, maybe it is time we had a gloves-off war over trade.
Well, I don't know if it's going to work either. History says it's unlikely to work, and I think the real challenge for President Trump is it's not what he's trying to do. What he's trying to do is popular, right? Bring back manufacturing, bring back more, Americans should make more things in America. That is that is a unifying idea. But the way he's gone about it, I think, has both been politically damaging to himself, and then obviously it could be catastrophic to the economy. It's not, to me, dissimilar to what happened to President Biden and the Afghanistan withdrawal. The idea of getting out of Afghanistan, that was universally popular, right? That had 60, 70%. Yes, get out. How he got out became a test of his competency, or frankly incompetency, of his administration. And when you look at how President Trump has done this, there's a good op-ed in the New York Times today, Owen Cass, who's a defender of the larger idea of what President Trump is doing, but simply seems to be sort of at his wit's end at sort of how he's trying to do it. Politically, he should have done his tax cut first and sort of essentially gradually increased and gradually talked about how he was going to do his tariffs. You do a little bit at a time, 3 months at a time, see who comes to the table. You give business a chance to absorb the new rules. And there is sort of, you can create some certainty in the business community. The way he's done it, I think he's jeopardized his political support in Congress, even among his fellow Republicans, and he's jeopardized the competency that I think many business leaders assumed he had with the economy. They looked at Trump 1 and thought, hey, that wasn't so bad. Now, I would look at it and say, well, he's got an entirely different slate of advisors surrounding him this time than he had in 1.0. Mike Pence, Reince Priebus, those guys were free marketers. They were free traders. There were a lot of free traders in his administration in Trump 1.0. Those folks don't exist in Trump 2.0. So I do think he's put himself and has put his party in massive political jeopardy by how he's gone about it. It's not the idea, it's how he's executed it.
Well, Matt Schlapp, that's a really interesting point Chuck makes, because we played a CNN clip earlier, them talking about a poll which showed that the majority of Americans are comfortable with the level of power that Donald Trump has, which might be a surprise to many people on the left, for example, who think he's completely out of control and he's a king and so on. So it's clear that the American people at the moment believe actually it's okay that he has this amount of power. But how he's utilizing it is clearly causing him a lot of personal poll rating damage, because another CNN poll I saw this morning showed that over the tariff issue, his support is definitely plummeting. And it is a massive roll of the dice. Whatever side you're on, whichever way you look at this, nobody has ever tried to launch a global trade war. He would dispute the word war, but I think most people would say that's what we're now in. A global trade war between the United States and everybody else, with China in particular responding against fire with fire. So the two things can be right. People might be comfortable that the president has this power to do this, but the way he's executing this is eating up his political capital. And again, I don't know if it's going to work. If it does, then he'll turn out to be a genius who played the ultimate blunt weapon, and it worked. If it doesn't work, conversely, he could be in serious political trouble, and the Republicans heading into the midterms might get one hell of a beating there and then another big beating in the next election. In other words, the stakes are incredibly high here.
Yeah, so that's been the theme of my last decade, Piers, has been, how can you be supporting Trump? You're going to get destroyed in the midterms. How can you support Trump? He's going to lose the American people. How can you support Trump? He's going to be the least popular president in our history. And what's turned out to be over the course of the last 8 years is he's actually turned into to be one of the most consequential presidents in our history. And there's a couple things that you have to realize, which is this trade war is going on already. He's just decided to engage it. So there was this acceptance by Democrats and Republicans, free traders, as Chuck just described them. I would quibble with that, but let's just say this. We were okay with America paying for everything. We were okay with American companies paying high tariffs and us having relatively low tariffs because we were so big and we were so successful and we dominated the economy and we dominated the globe. And then over time, the American middle class got hollowed out and the American people soured on this idea of globalism, and they soured on this idea that there was an upside to getting cheap T-shirts and cheap underwear when you couldn't work at the plant anymore. You couldn't find a job, and what you were told by a lot of people is that's okay, you'll get retrained and you'll become a computer technician, and that hasn't worked out so great for everyone. The other war that we've woken up to is the idea that we're in a global war with China, whether we want to accept that or not. They are all over this globe. They have become the globe's banker. They're creating all the infrastructure on all these continents. I see this with all the travels we do with CPAC. And China is very explicit over the long run. They want to take us out. And the fact that they make almost all of our medicine and almost all the key things that we use to get by in our daily existence needs to be re-examined if we understand that the one making everything is the one who militarily and economically wants to take America out. The final lesson we've learned is Donald Trump doesn't do things because he has to do them, which is what Republican presidents usually do. They don't do anything until they actually are forced to do something. He's doing like 350 things that he doesn't really necessarily need to do in terms of the schedule, but he's doing them because he feels like America is going to lose its edge unless we have some corrections in these areas, including on trade.
Okay, Jamaal Bowman, Kevin O'Leary doesn't think Trump's going nearly hard enough. He launched a searing attack on China's economic war, as he phrased it, against particularly the United States. And he said this.
104% tariffs on China are not enough. I'm advocating 400%. I do business in China. They don't play by the rules. They've been in the WTO for decades. They have never abided by any of the rules they agreed to when they came in for decades. They cheat, they steal IP. I can't litigate in their courts. They take product, technology, they steal it, they manufacture it and sell it back here. Never has an administration.
400% tariffs? What would that look like?
I want Xi on an airplane to Washington to level the playing field.
Now, Jamaal, people might say, well, that's outrageous and so on, but he's not a fool, Kevin O'Leary. He's a very successful guy, and he believes that what Trump is doing is not only right, but not aggressive enough, that you've got to take the war to China because they've been waging an economic war for a sustained period of time now, and it will eventually, potentially, put them above the United States.
For me, the simple question is, how is this trade war, how are these tariffs going to help the American people? And when I say the American people, I mean the working class American people. Is this going to help bring down the cost of childcare, the cost of groceries, the cost of utilities? Is this going to help create millions of jobs here in America and create a federal jobs guarantee? That's what Trump is saying. That's what his supporters are saying. But I would love to hear more about what the actual plan is. What is the best case scenario? What is the moderate scenario? and what is the worst case scenario. Right now, markets are inconsistent, and that inconsistency is not good for the American economy overall. But quite honestly, where I am in Yonkers, New York, where I represented the Bronx, places like Mount Vernon, working class, historically redline communities, whether the market is up or down, it is bad for working class people. And so Mr. O'Leary, Trump, people like that who already have incredible wealth and resources, they have these conversations in a way that's disconnected from the American people. You know what you do to beat China? You invest in your own country and in your own communities. And the communities and where I've represented have been neglected by both our U.S. government and the private sector. The private sector has been more focused on enriching itself than it has the American people. And my worry is this going to lead to the further concentration of power and wealth for the 0.1% wherever it lands, while the majority of the American people continue to struggle? That's my worry. That's my concern. And I have not heard anything from the Trump administration. I see no leadership from Congress on either side of the aisle as it relates to our economic power and strength and health and well-being going forward.
Okay, Lindy Li, one of the interesting things I think about all this is the way that Trump's own top team are at loggerheads with each other very publicly. And I'm talking particularly about Elon Musk and Peter Navarro. So you've got Musk, who seemed to be Trump's right-hand guy on all things economic and Doge and so on. And you've got Navarro, who's one of his top trade advisors. And they're openly abusing each other and attacking each other. And it's clear that they have a fundamental disagreement over whether tariffs could work. You know, Elon Musk looks at this as a business guy running huge businesses, which are currently taking a hell of a beating. Very difficult to make Tesla cars at affordable prices, given how many parts they source from outside America, if the tariffs make it prohibitive to do so. So he has, you know, on the one hand, he's trying to cut waste. On the other hand, he's trying to save his own businesses. Navarro, completely different. You know, he's all in with all this. I can't remember a time where you've seen senior people in an administration so early into a presidency publicly having this kind of slanging match. I mean, I got to say, I find it quite healthy. You know, I don't really like the concept of collective responsibility where everyone pretends they all agree with each other. But what we're seeing are the kind of inner conversations all playing out in public, a bit like we saw with Trump and J.D. Vance and President Zelensky. You know, it is very transparent, but what do you think of it? Is this healthy or not?
Piers, I love it. Frankly, this puts the lie to the fact, you know, what Democrats are saying, that Trump is a king. You think a king would allow dissension within the ranks? I don't think so.
They're not allowing dissension. He does everything he can to suppress dissension and control the conversation. And one of the things that was cited earlier on that I didn't include in this clip was a survey that says, you know, there's like 47% of Americans in a recent poll that thinks Trump has too much power. And then between people that don't think he has too much power, i.e. the right amount of power, and the sort of 17% that think he doesn't have enough power, that's a slim majority of the American people. But that presumes that everybody is this sort of three-dimensional thinker who's, you're right, half of the people are just watching state television, Fox News, where they're being outright lied to. So, I mean, half of the, however many percentage of the people think that Trump had the 2020 election stolen from him, which has been proven false again and again and again. So you can't be like, well, people think this. Yeah, but a huge percentage of the people are being deliberately brainwashed.
So I'm actually really happy to see this spilling out into the public. And I think retardo, which is the phrase that Elon used, is actually pretty clever. And I want to say, last time, Piers, you questioned my loyalty. I want to say one thing, though. I lost like 25% of my net worth in the last couple of weeks because I am so heavy on the NASDAQ and tech stocks, yet I am willing to give Trump a chance. It's only been 4.5 trading days, so I'm willing to see how this is going to play out. And frankly, as Caroline Levitt just said a few hours ago, Trump has a spine of steel. I'm sorry. So let's just see who's going to blink first.
Well, I'm going to stop it there because she's being absurd. But For the other panelists, I think it's all fairly level-headed, which is kind of rare for me watching Piers Morgan's show. To me, Jamaal Bowman cuts right to the bone, right? How is this going to help Americans? We're talking about a cabinet full of billionaires, and all of these people are wealthy, and they're talking about weathering the storm and the grand plan and the mastermind Trump behind it all. And you're kind of like, look, what happens if you're not a billionaire, right? What are we going to do? And people harp on the price of eggs, but I mean, again, Jamaal Bowman, how is this going to lower the cost of healthcare? How is this going to lower the cost of childcare, right? The day-to-day operations of the vast majority of American citizens. And the answer is lying right there, folks. Donald Trump doesn't care about you. Donald Trump can't conceive of what your day-to-day life is actually like. And yeah, I know he went and did a photo op in McDonald's. That's not the same. You understand intuitively what I'm talking about here. And I like it when Piers Morgan is in the shout fest. I think you actually get to put a lot of points on the table and have a level-headed conversation about them. So enough of that. My vote would go to what Jamaal Bowman says. I think Chuck Todd's playing it fairly neutral. And I don't think much of what the other two guests say. Piers himself is being fairly neutral and journalistic, which that's my favorite Piers. So why don't you let me know what you think in the comments? Are you like me? You're on Team Jamaal Bowman, or are you a Chuck Todd person, or whatever these other two baloney heads are called? Let me know in the comments.